Welcome to the Micromobility podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. We have the company that actually started what we see around in most of the cities across the world, which is Bird. So, Travis, somewhere in 2017, launched Bird with a scooter, an off-the-shelf scooter that was meant for direct-to-consumer use. Fixed an IoT, got an app, built a business around it, and that created a massive industry, billions of dollars across the world invested in this space. I can also say that the last couple of years, maybe a lot of cities thought about putting protected bike lanes, increasing the current infrastructure or improving current infrastructure because of that. So it radically transforms cities. Any city that you go to, large cities, you will see these scooters around. And today we have Michael, who came into the company during a tough time, navigated the business, and last year had a turnaround year, 200 million in close to 200 million in GMV, and about close to 20 million in EBITDA. Massive turnaround story in the industry. Super happy to have Michael today. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Oh, Prabin, thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on your show. Thank you.
So just to talk about your background, so you were at FreshBooks as a CFO, you were at Xerox XM as a CFO, and you joined Bird during one of the tough times as CFO, right? And then transitioned to CEO. Can you talk us a bit about that journey?
SiriusXM was my first volley into what I say startup. Even though it was launched in the US, we licensed the technology in Canada, and we effectively had to raise capital and build a business and make that business model profitable. And I would say that was my first foray into, knowing that business models never, the actual execution of a business never follows what you planned in a business model. Something always goes not to expected, usually to the negative, rarely in the positive. And so you have to learn to adapt. And XM at the time was one of those companies where we raised a lot of capital, had great plans, but things happened. 2008 recession, capital constraints. And so you had to learn to adapt through adversity. And that was my first, as a CFO, had to learn how to adjust the company through a lot of adversity. Thankfully enough, that company successfully merged with Sirius and became a powerhouse in Canada in terms of significant positive EBITDA and strong growth. After that, I wanted to get into technology. And so I started as a CFO for FreshBooks, was a Series B company. Let's say, sub $50 million of revenue at that time. Great innovative technology in terms of bringing accounting services for small businesses to the cloud and making it super simple for them. And again, this business, great idea. One of those things where the business plan was very aspirational and needed a lot of capital. And what I did was help raise the capital for this business, and at the same time, really help me understand how technology companies, in terms of the culture of a technology company, how they think about this. Because as you know, anything in terms of the disruptive technologies, there is no playbook that you pull and saying, this is what we execute. You're making the playbook as it goes. And what's critical about creating a playbook is you need to have a great set of people. You need to have a great set of values. You need to have a great North Star to be able to direct everyone properly to achieve the goals of that company. And I learned a tremendous amount from the founder, Mike, the company, the employees at FreshBooks that gave me that skill set to understand how to truly work in a disruptive industry and make that company successful. And so when I take my experiences of XM and experiences at FreshBooks, unknowingly, I wouldn't say this was intentional. It's like I felt we're very prepared for joining Bird. And how I came across in terms of Bird was Bird Canada was a license of Bird Global and a very successful business. They bootstrapped the business, actually had some capital, but some of it's also, started bootstrap, but they also had some additional capital. And with that capital, generated a business that was EBITDA positive within the first 1 to 2 years and on track to being positive free cash flow. So successful execution of a business plan in the first 2 or 3 years, but had a concern. The concern was Bird Global was struggling, raised a lot of capital, burned a lot of capital, and we couldn't see a pathway where this business, that mothership, we call it the mothership, was going to be profitable. So the Bird Canada investors, wanting to protect their investments and be proactive, had started conversations with Bird Global. And that conversation was about merging in Bird Canada operations with Bird Global and injecting some capital in the form of debt into Bird Global. And that transpired at the end of 2023, I believe.
Okay.
2023. Where, no, sorry, 2020.
It was just before the bankruptcy, right? So,
Yeah,
so
it was
it
just
should be like
before the,
mid 2023, I believe, right?
yeah, mid, yeah.
Yeah.
So we decided to, so that part of that capital injection, they asked me to be the CFO.
Got it. Got
And
it.
so that's how I started with Bird Global as a CFO.
I still remember when the announcement came in. So I've been following Bird's story for a very long time, and when there was an announcement, there was a filing on, and there was a SEC filing, and when I read your name, I looked at your profile, and I thought you're brave. It's it's a company that's that definitely needs brave people to be on board. I mean, it wasn't in the right shape. I think we spoke about as well. If you look at the G&A at that time, it was more than the revenue for some of the quarters, and it takes a lot of courage to take on that role, right? Why did you take on that role?
Why did I take on that role? I love the category. I started to I appreciate the category. We're definitely solving a problem for commuters in a city. We're solving a problem for the city by reducing congestion, and we're actually making the world a better place by reducing CO2 emissions.
Yeah.
So I really thought this category is doing a great thing.
Yeah.
And what I saw too was this company had significant amount of gross bookings. It had presence in number of cities, so diversified, not only North America but Europe and the Mid East. So I thought this company has got a great revenue base. What this company has not done is optimized its gross margins, optimized its operating expenses, and to most people, that's my God. Getting to that optimizations is a headache and hard to do, but that's a challenge I love doing, because that's a challenge in terms of trying to ask the hard questions to everyone. It's like, do we really need to do it this way? Is there a better way of doing this? Do we really need this operating expenses? Is there a cheaper way of doing things? I found that I love challenges, and I found that challenge is one that I wanted to sign up for. So one would call it brave. I call it this is fun. I mean, trying to solve these kind of challenges is a lot of fun. This is part of what makes you. This is part of what gets me. I wake up every day, and it's also part of the reason why I don't sleep. But that's these kind of challenges are fun.
Absolutely. So, if you look, if for people who have followed Bird's financials very closely, what is very clear is that gross margins are decent. I mean, you mentioned that there was some gross margin optimization that you had to do. Even without optimization, the gross margins were pretty decent. If you compare that with Uber at that time or DoorDash at that time, it was comparable, or in some quarters, it was even better than DoorDash and Uber. Right.
Right.
And when you look at those numbers, I was so glad that a CFO took over the role of CEO, because it was a numbers game. It's pure math in front of you, because Bird did not have a revenue problem. I mean, the revenue was decent. The only problem was the metrics downstream, right? So I think you were the right pick for that role. Looking back now, right? A question on so there's Bird pre bankruptcy and post, right? So if you look at the founding story of Bird, right, but had a philosophy that there was a culture in place, right? Post bankruptcy, did anything change? Is it the same bird, or now it's a completely different company, completely different culture?
Um, I can't say it's a completely different company, but I would say it's a company that went through a major overhaul.
Right.
Obviously, as a company, as a culture, as a focus area, we had to do a bit of an overhaul. Proud to say, I mean, we have a significant amount of employees who were there even pre-bankruptcy, even from the start. Like our technology team, I think the average tenure is 4 to 5 years. We have many what we call OG developers who've been here, and as you know, part of this business is the technology, and so that element or culture is still there. But the other aspects of it, whether it's government relations or operations, we did a bit of an overhaul
Mhm.
with in terms of new blood, but more importantly throughout the organization, um, new values. So we reintroduced a value framework within the organization. We then also put a focus area on operations. Like focusing on making sure the vehicle is at the right place
Yep.
at the right time. It's the right, it's in a great condition. It's at the right price. These kind of operational fundamentals I found were missing, and maybe it's because the previous generation was focusing on the FM model. So we're dependent on those FMs to actually do that. It's ultimately the onus is on us, and
Yep.
so as an organization, focusing on the vehicle and focusing on the people was part of that major overhaul that we did. And I think that's the biggest change between pre-Bird
Yep.
bankruptcy and post-Bird bankruptcy is you got a team that's working together.
Mhm.
So no, we broke down a lot of the silos, um, have understand and share the common values throughout the entire organization, and knows exactly what the North Star of the organization is and what our mission needs to be done.
That would have been challenging, right? I mean, going through what Bird went through for almost like 4 or 5 years, or more than that. I think 6 7 years, right? Massive fundraisers. The team had a completely different mindset. Now it's a very different mindset, right? Like exactly like you mentioned, right? It's a very lean team. How did you manage to keep the team together? How did you keep the team motivated?
Um, a number of things. First of all, I do want to explain that you know I think the pre-bankruptcy, even before I got started, and this was not just Bird. I think this is a
Yep.
lot of technology companies, and it was you got to explain at the time. Um, Focus was growth,
Yep.
growth at all costs. Like top line revenue was important. We'll figure out gross margin and gross profit and OpEx later down the road. Let's focus at all growth at all costs. And that gets you into challenges because what Pre-Bird did was not only acquired, aggressively grew, but started going into other revenue lines like retail or bird payments. So
Yep.
these are things that were, almost it felt like throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what stuck. And that creates, so many work streams that everyone is focusing on, everyone is working on. You kind of lose what are we focusing on as an
Mhm.
organization? What is the entire organization rowing into in terms of the same direction? Because if you're having multiple different revenue streams, and let's say I'm going to use the engineering team, and you have one engineering team, all of a sudden you have multiple people pulling at those same resources.
Yep.
You're constantly talking about prioritization in terms of what we need to focus on. And you're almost doing a jack of all trades, master of none scenario as an
Mhm.
organization. And so
Yep.
one of the other shifts that we did was focus. Let's focus on shared micromobility. Let's focus on the markets that really are profitable for us, which is obviously North America and
Mhm.
certain areas of Europe. And let's put all our resources on that. And honestly, Prabin, that was a big element in terms of motivating people because now people are saying, now I know exactly what the mission is. I know what we're focusing on. I
Yep.
know what I am doing is what is going to contribute towards in terms of the outcome or success for the business. And that was I think that was the biggest thing in terms of motivating people. And
Mhm.
because people then also saw there's a good chance that we're going to be profitable. I see a
Yeah.
pathway now. Um, we have a lot of smart people. Like, I mean, on our organization, there's a lot of smart people. People know if the company is struggling. People know
Yeah.
if, okay, capital markets are running dry, where we're going to get the capital. And more importantly, am I going to have a job in the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah.
And if people are questioning that, then that obviously is a demotivator and also does not help with retention.
Yeah.
So when you switch it to saying, okay, here's our focus area, and you communicate not only that, but you can our progress, and so you're transparent about our financial results. We talk about all hands our financial results, and you tell them about the challenges, that we're aware of the challenges, and here's we're planning to deal with it. And caveat, there's no guarantee that we're going to overcome these challenges, but we're definitely aware of it and we're dealing with it.
Yeah.
That puts everyone's mind at rest. That's and you've hired people who love the mission. You hired people who love what they're doing, but obviously everyone wants to make sure that, I have a job so that I can provide a roof over my head. I can provide food for the family.
Yeah.
And if we can address that, like from a macro point of view, you really switch the culture, the motivation of the team.
Absolutely.
And combine that with values, a good mission statement, good North Star. These are, and, right, career pathing, you communicate as we grow, here's your potential career path. You have a very strong culture. And I think
Absolutely.
it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
I would say we're still building that, but, it's definitely been much, much better than it was 2 years ago.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that you were transparent about the financials. A lot of companies are like very protective about their financials, and I think that also brings people together. I mean, they feel some belongingness to the organization as well, right? And in addition to that, having a focus absolutely helps. So from an employee point of view, team point of view, you did a couple of things to retain. But what's even more fascinating for me is that if you look at 2023, right? I think if you look at the tail end of the year, maybe the last like 23 days, revenue from that, and the entire year revenue reported, probably that's close to 200 million, I believe, 200 to 10 million, if I'm
Thereabouts,
not wrong,
yes.
roughly around that. And that was just around the time when the bankruptcy filing happened. 2024, right? You're actually going through bankruptcy, all the restructuring, but you managed to get to 200 million GMV. I'm guessing the net would be about 170, 180 million. It's still, super impressive, right? Compared to, the tough year that you went through. How do you manage to retain revenues, though you pulled out of many geographies as well, right?
Yeah, you got to remember, Private. So we acquired the Spin brand probably about 4 or 5 months prior to filing for Chapter 11. So that bolstered our revenue base in North America, and we obviously didn't realize the full year's worth of revenue in 23. But when we went into Chapter 11, I think the biggest threat that we saw going through this was the cities getting nervous and pulling their licenses away from us, and us effectively losing our city presence, especially the profitable cities. What my co-CEO was extremely good at was the relationships with the city, especially in North America, and having a strong GP team. And so doing proactive reach outs, explaining the whole Chapter 11, explaining how it makes it stronger, makes the company much more viable, put the cities at ease. And so from I'll call forced loss of revenue, we saw nothing. We retained every one of our cities in every market that we wanted to operate. From a profit optimization, we made a conscious decision, and we did this prior to Chapter 11. We knew that there were cities that were not profitable, and profitable doesn't necessarily mean a city can have positive gross profit, but if the ultimate lifetime value of a vehicle in that particular city is not at a great ratio to the cost of a vehicle, then we pull that out. So we have this lifetime value of a vehicle against the acquisition cost of a vehicle, which is obviously called $600. If the LTV is below a threshold, then we will exit the city, because what people don't think of, well, we all have to think about is, yes, positive gross profit is great, but is it enough to potentially pay back the investment of a vehicle? And if it's not, and we can optimize that in another city, you move it. And so we exited out of those cities to make the company much, much more stronger.
Got it. So is it fair to assume that Spin actually grew in 2024 compared to 2023 then?
For us, for the business that we had, because we only realized the first 4 or 5 months of revenue. So we're obviously, you saw growth as a cup for third lane mobility with the acquisition of Spin, because you only realized the part of the year. But the Spin acquisition was very successful for us in terms of it also gave us access to key markets that we did not have access to.
And probably the hardware as well, right? I mean, I think it was right around the time when swappable versus non-swappable conversation was very popular across the world.
It was the latest generation. Most of their vehicles were the latest generation vehicles.
Yeah. A question on, because you were brought in at a time, you can call it as the wartime for Bird. You were the CEO through one of the tough times that Bird went through. What the biggest or the toughest decision that you had to take during that transition? Can you tell me one decision that was like the toughest, and how do you make that decision?
The toughest decision.
Because I strongly believe that the success of Bird post bankruptcy is the consequence of sequence of decisions, right? And I'm pretty sure there should be at least one decision that was like pretty tough to make.
Honestly, I don't know if there's one single tough decision that we had to make. You know what? The decision, there are multiple. It's like, when you think about the process of Chapter 11, obviously the Chapter 11 helps you optimize the balance sheet, and also helps you understand which contracts you want to keep or not, or which ones you want to negotiate better. So the toughest decisions were minor ones, or series of small ones, was which vendor relationships do we want to keep? Which ones do we think are going to be the right partners for the future for us? And, can we negotiate a better deal from this? Because pre-Chapter 11, we had tons of vendors, no focus. And so we wanted to streamline that. And so streamlining it to a handful, let's say I'm making an example, but from 100 to 10, was a tough decision. Like, and you don't create a rubric on this in terms of, you don't have time creating a rubric. So you almost have to go through every contract and listen to those who are close to the contract, and then make a decision right there. And that was probably I'd say the toughest ones, because you're doing it a little bit on data, but also a little bit on gut to decide what's the right thing for the company. Because ultimately it's the toughest. These are a series of tough conversations, because once you exit Chapter 11, you're living with this, and you're living with that decision for a very long period of time. And Absolutely. So that would be that would be the toughest decision. Honestly, I think the toughest thing to do was having the team motivated and having them see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. That honestly, that's tough. Retention rates, surprisingly enough, people retention rates through Chapter 11 was strong. Once we exited, we did see an exit of people. But after that, our retention rates were very, very strong. And so I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that we kept most of the engineering team. We kept a lot of the operating team. We kept everyone through, because Chapter 11 is not fun. It's not a great time to be in. No one wants to be in Chapter 11, obviously. But, to have people, know that, potentially a job that provides the roof over my head and food to the family is at risk because you're at Chapter 11, and people still actually stay with you. That's for me proud. And I'm extremely, honestly, I am humbled by the team, like the passion, the energy, the innovation, and the resilience of this team to go through all of that. And especially when you look at some of the team members who've been here since 2018, 2019, to
Mhm.
go through the highs of capital and the
Yeah.
lows of Chapter 11, still love this category and still want to contribute. It's amazing.
Exactly, and then it doesn't help when I still remember when the announcement came out. There was so much on Twitter, and also like reporters writing about the what's going on, and people confused between Chapter 11 and Chapter 7.
Yep.
So there was so much noise saying that Bird is completely dead. And I remember James and I got on a podcast talking about why Bird is not dead, and this is a time for it's a time for a resurrection, and Chapter 7 is very different from Chapter 11, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and, and
It's interesting. I listened to you. Brad, that's how I came to get to know you, and I wanted to meet you. Was listening to that. It's interestingly enough. Obviously, that was a busy time, but your podcast came very eloquently right after we filed. I listened to it, and honestly, I think that was a time I said I want to reach out and talk to you about this, and talk to you about my viewpoints on this.
yeah,
But you know what? Just to go on that, it was interesting. I mean, also through Chapter 11, and that's another thing the teams had to do this. It was you had to build a thick skin because the media loves to jump on things in terms of what's not going well, and everyone loves to say, the high flying bird raised all this money, now it's in Chapter 11, now it has no future.
Mhm.
You had to build a thick skin, and
Yeah,
you knew that your employees are seeing the same press release, and so you had to give them confidence that let's stick through this. We can weather the storm. We can get through this.
exactly.
We will come out victorious.
Yeah, and surprising enough, not many wrote about 2024 results.
No, no, that's right. Exactly.
Right. I mean, when I look at 2024 numbers, that's like in certain terms, it's the best ever for Bird, right? I mean, because first year of EBITDA profitability and all that, right? And not many picked on it, right?
Yeah, of course not.
So you mentioned about getting out of cities based on certain metrics, right?
Yeah.
What's your North Star today? I mean, if you have to follow a couple of metrics for your business, for example, if you have to decide, saying that you want to exit a city, for example, right? What are a couple of metrics that you look at? What's your North Star metric in this
So
business?
I'd say we have been focused. Our focus was getting to EBITDA positive.
Mhm.
Our next focus will be EBITDA and free cash flow. That was making sure gross margins were strong. OpEx was we can leverage OpEx to grow. Was our focus area, not our North Star, but our focus area for the past 12 to 18 months. I would say our North Star, and that's now a shining light that we spend a lot of time focusing on, is rides.
Okay.
And the reason it's rides is ultimately rides will drive revenue. Revenue obviously will drive the gross profit that we can
Mhm.
leverage OpEx. And so we are focusing on growing rides in all the markets that we operate. And we are also focused on expanding to new cities to ultimately drive rides, not free rides, obviously,
Yeah.
but rides. And, part of what I'd like to think that we were trying to do is we want micromobility be ubiquitous as possible around
Mhm.
the world. Everyone should be able to activate a vehicle around the world and ride it, and people should feel like this is a commuting device.
Yeah.
And when they're tourists, it's a fun device to see the city. But I want people to think about this as a viable way of getting to work, going to a
Mhm.
restaurant, going to the grocery stores, doing things that they need to do. If we can make this, and as not just us, but I think our competitors, if we can make this ubiquitous, you've entrenched yourself as a form of transportation.
Yeah.
And no different than the cities. Like many countries feel ride sharing is a public transportation, and it should be funded by the city to be able to do that. I'd love for
Mhm.
us to do that. I'd love that every city to be able to do that, because I do believe we're a fundamental part of public transportation.
Yeah.
And ultimately, to get to that point is building rides. The more consumers use it, the more they ride it, the more cities in the world will be aware of what this category has,
Mhm.
what can contribute.
Got it. How important is revenue per vehicle per day? Because I mean, if you look at metrics from the operators out there, one of the key metrics that that everyone is focusing on is revenue per vehicle, because at the end of the day, you're buying a vehicle and you want to have a payback period, and some operators have like really big high numbers. For example, Lime, I think their revenue per vehicle per day is more than $6, I believe. I think Voi is pushing close to €3 in Europe. How important is that metric for you?
That's an important metric. I call that, we call it net revenue per available vehicle.
Okay.
A lot of people look at it, and you know, you got to be careful with this in terms of, obviously there are a lot of companies talk about vanity metrics, and you know how you define these metrics is important. Context in terms of the definitions
Yeah.
is important, and I think that you fall down a pathway of, if you define this to make you feel good, like, we get X millions of rides, even though maybe some of the rides are canceled rides, or or you find some other definition to increase the ride volume,
Mhm.
and ultimately it's not a reflection of who's riding the business.
Yep.
Um, so what we try to do at Bird is we try to make these metrics as authentic as possible. It's like,
Mhm.
who is riding? Are they riding a vehicle? Are they actually paying us? And then understanding the overall revenue associated with that vehicle on an available vehicle per day
Yep.
is something that we do track, and that's an important metric. It's an indicator for us in terms of lifetime value of a vehicle, because we know the implied value, like a vehicle will last about 5-6 years, and we know there's a minimum amount of revenue per available vehicle that needs to be generated to get a LTV to vehicle acquisition threshold that we find acceptable.
Got it. Um, how easy is it to retain customers? So if you go back to 2017, 18 times, and if you look at the fundraising that Bird went through, right? Bird was and is today as well, is a very popular brand,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I do you think there's customer loyalty in micromobility? Do you think having a big brand name like Bird helps in certain way? Just to give you an idea, just to give you an example. I mean, if you look at say Rolex or Apple, there's brand loyalty. People buy
Yes.
Apple because they are loyal to Apple, right? Do you think there's loyalty to a brand here?
Um, I would love for us to have that brand loyalty of a loyal Rolex or Apple.
Yeah.
I think in certain markets we do have that.
Hmm.
It's amazing when you go to, because obviously this is where it started in West Coast in LA. There's a high brand recognition of Bird, and even as you go east, there's a high recognition of brand, and that's really helped our category. That's really
Yeah.
helped our business. Because when you see a vehicle and you're familiar with it, obviously you're going to download it and you're going to use it. I would say that the most important decision point for a rider is is the vehicle there,
Hmm. Hmm.
and is being the vehicle at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Um, Brand loyalty will help if I'm at the corner, I see a vehicle and it's not a Bird, but
Hmm.
I see a Bird 50 meters down the street. Brand loyalty will help me, that
Walk.
person will
Yeah.
walk over to that vehicle to do that. But the
Yeah.
number one is the vehicle is at the right place at the right
Yeah.
time. So it's important. I don't think we're there yet.
Hmm.
You know, maybe in a world when there's only 2 to 3 operators around the world, then you start to build brand loyalty. And if you have better price points or subscription prices, then you create brand. You create not necessarily brand loyalty. You
Yeah.
create a higher retention rate.
Got it. Got it. How sensitive are users to price? I mean, I'm specifically referring to pay-as-you-go users. So, for passes, I believe people do pick a pass because it's cheaper. For
Yeah.
pay-as-you-go users, do you think people are price sensitive?
Um, yes and no. The answer is yes and no. I think we look at this. There's almost 3 types of users. There's the power users who use it on a regular basis. They're subscription like. They're extremely loyal, and those are the ones, actually, if I would say there's a brand loyalty, They have high brand loyalty. They love our vehicles. They love riding it. They don't want to do anything else. Now, I want more of them. I'd love to have as many of those as possible. But they're a subset. The second group that we have is what we'll call leisure riders. They happen to be living in a city. They use Bird, but they may use it once a week, maybe 3 or 4 times a month. Those power users are using the ride pass. The leisure riders are pay as you go, and they are price sensitive. They if they took a ride, and everyone has this expectation. Like, I take a ride, it's $3 to $4, that may sound expensive in Europe, but in the U.S. that's on a low end. Like our typical, it can be as high as $5 or $6. And so if you take a ride and it's within what you expected to, they're going to keep on using it. But if you do a price increase and all of a sudden it's like $6, $7, or $8, then they start thinking, I'd rather walk, or Uber or Lyft might be cheaper. So they're I would say they're price sensitive. Then there's the other category of tourists. Tourists, I think, are just by nature, you're on vacation, you want to see the city. You're price sensitive. You got to be reasonable in terms of a price point, but you're not as sensitive as the leisure riders or as the power users. And so there is a little bit of pricing flexibility there. The challenge is, how do you know who's getting on a vehicle or opening up the app? True. Are they a tourist or they're a leisure rider? And that's kind of what you have to. That's the data science. The other price sensitivity, obviously, is I need to get to point A to point B. Rideshare is extremely expensive. I don't want to take public transportation. There's no other options for me. People are obviously not price sensitive. It's like, it's the surge pricing for rideshare. And that one at that particular moment, people aren't price sensitive. Again, goes to data science in terms of identifying when's that right time to be able to optimize price.
Got it. Because I love numbers, and then you were a CFO of Bird as well. I have to ask this. So 2023 and 22 and all that, we know the numbers of Bird. For 2024, post bankruptcy and after all the restructuring, apart from the top line, were there some metrics that actually surprised you? Just to give you an idea, I mean, before bankruptcy, after you came into the company, I think the best quarter gross margin was around 50 odd percentage, 54%, I believe, something like that. G&A was coming as a percentage of revenue; it was coming down. Was there one or two metrics that actually surprised you in 2024 post restructuring?
What surprised me, Prabin, is like, I don't want to, because I'll be cognizant of what we've released publicly, but on a full year basis, excluding vehicle depreciation, we achieved a gross margin close to what you said is the peak. Best quarter.
Okay.
So with obviously quarters that are significantly lower in terms of revenue, we've been able to get to gross margin, and we believe that's sustainable. And so that didn't surprise me. That was by design. I think you need to have a gross profit dollars and gross margin to be able to have a business sustainable. What's surprised me a little bit is how efficient we can get on OpEx. And just the operating team, the R&D team, and G&A, how just by focusing on specific areas, we can get the costs down, and without impacting output. And I'm going to use the one that's most quantifiable is R&D. We have a great engineering team. I would say our velocity of new releases hasn't changed for the past 2 or 3 years, yet the size of the team is significantly lower than it was before. And so that surprised me. I mean, you can get the OpEx down by design, but to be able to be more efficient and in fact actually increase productivity in absolute numbers, that was surprising.
Yes, the same Twitter story as well, right? I mean, what happened after Elon Musk took over? Um, in terms of G&A, so for you to be EBITDA positive, I'm very sure that from a G&A point of view, you improved a ton, right? I mean, I think just before bankruptcy, I still remember it was in say 60-70% of your revenue was G&A, right?
Yep.
Uh, what are a couple of things that you did to bring G&A under control?
Um,
And of course, you cannot probably uh, give us an exact number what the G&A percentage was, but
no,
it's
no,
super interesting to
no.
that you.
The biggest things that we did was focus. I mean,
Mhm.
focusing on shared micromobility. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, it's no secret. We had a retail team. We had a team that was dedicated to building um, hardware for our vehicle, like vehicle hardware.
Mhm.
Um, we made that decision to outsource that. We made a decision not to do retail anymore. We made a decision to actually focus on the markets that are most successful for us, and that helps naturally reduce G&A because there is HR teams or finance or within the executive team, because the executive team was included in G&A. You had
Yeah.
executive teams responsible for specific lines of business. By being focused on one area, we were able to reduce the G&A significantly. Um,
Got it.
Another area of G&A was, I don't know how this will come out for people, but it was like I found tech companies
Hmm.
love hiring other tech companies. And so like large brand
Yeah,
names to support their business. And
yeah,
that, they're the same 5, 6 large enterprise software
yeah,
that you use. And it's overkill. It's significant overkill. And, asking that question as to, and I'll use the example, and it's not the two companies that we use, but
hmm,
um, do you use Workday or can you get it with Bamboo?
yeah,
Clearly, I mean, they're two different. I'm
yeah,
not going to argue that Bamboo does what Workday does, but
yeah.
there are different cost structures in terms of what
Exactly.
those two costs. And I'm going to use that. That's an easy that is one example. But you multiply that 10 times on other pieces of software,
Hmm.
then you say, like, you ask the question, and maybe that's another tough decision. You
Yeah,
ask the team and challenge the team is like, to do your job, do you really need this particular software, enterprise software, that's costing 10x of what something else can do?
yeah,
You really need to do this.
yeah,
And
yeah.
if you can give me a rationale as to why and why it's going to justify the productivity, I'm all for it.
Hmm.
But if you can find out a way to do it for with that software and it's significantly cheaper, let's do that. And that's honestly, Prime, that's how we also got
Hmm.
like our G&A costs down, because it was just over the top in terms of where we were spending.
Absolutely, it's absolutely impressive, and I don't know if a lot of folks actually understand how difficult it is to turn around Bird from what it was to what the numbers that you achieved in 2024. I mean, I would have loved to read through your annual accounts. I was absolutely
Yeah,
unlucky.
to be a fly on the wall. I mean, someday, maybe over drinks, I'll share you some of the war stories that keep you
Yeah,
completely off the record. But
yeah,
there were things that at the time seemed to be the right decision and the right
yeah.
approach. Had ramifications in terms of significant incremental costs
Hmm.
that they didn't think about. And those were the decisions we had to make, saying, okay, you know what, we can do it this way. We can do it a lot
Yeah,
cheaper. We can do it better. And the other thing, just on Private, the other
yeah.
way of looking at it was we we created a mindset of profitable growth. I
Hmm.
mean, people understand this is not growth at all costs. We have to be able to, and I think this is the fun thing about now. I think all our remaining competitors in this category, in order to be a self-sustainable business, you have to have EBITDA positive.
Yeah,
EBIT, free cash. I mean, we talked about this. We
yeah.
also ultimately have to be free cash flow. We have to generate enough cash to be able to replace the vehicles, repair the vehicles, and have enough cash to be able to grow into new markets. And that I think everyone in our company understands that mission or requirement, and everyone's questioning, do we really need to spend this money? Does that get us to that target that we want? Does that drive the North Star of rides?
Yeah.
And ultimately, that North Star of rides gives us that positive free cash flow that we need.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's a high volume, low margin business. I mean, at the end of the day, if you had the hardware, if you had depreciation and all that, and you got to have some discipline, right, to get those numbers. I want to talk to you about your hardware strategy. So if you go back to say 2017, 18, 19 times, Bird came up with few iterations of Bird's own scooters. They were pretty good looking. They had good hardware as well, and we had this conversation at some point as well about the Bird scooters do not have swappable batteries, and every city, almost any tender out there, they are mandating swappable batteries. um, Today, as we stand, what's your hardware strategy looks like? I mean, what's how are you dealing with hardware?
Yeah, part of the advantage of coming into this category late is pragmatism. Like, what's right for this category? And I would caveat, being Bird being the innovators, obviously Travis getting a retail product and then putting an IoT device on and making us the first shared micromobility was amazing idea. That then evolved into, we should be designing and building our own vehicles.
Yeah.
And there became a sense of pride of our vehicles. And, it made, and also a sense of stick to this. It's like, we made a decision that, non-swappables was the way to go. We're almost died by the sword for that. And I had the advantage of it wasn't my idea. It was just like from a pragmatic point of view, it appears that swappables seem to make sense. The vehicle could be there all day long. You just swap a battery. Why wouldn't you do that? So, we talked about this. That seemed to be a decision. I also think, and this is still, and I think obviously everyone has swappable batteries. So it's obviously been validated. The one area that's probably been, not everyone is doing this, is, do you spend the R&D? Do you invest in building your own vehicle? And I think we at Bird made a decision that, while, we have very smart people that can actually design and build a vehicle, the cost of having that team to do that is too high compared to the revenue that we're in right now.
Yeah.
And there are many great companies that have significantly higher R&D or willing to invest in building vehicles for us. We've made it as easy to, I think it was not a hard decision for us to switch to buying third party. And we still have vehicles that were from our original manufacturer, Joybolt. We've bought vehicles from Okai. We bought Segway. So we've realized that, third parties can build the vehicles, design the vehicles to what we need. And especially now, as the category has evolved, I would say the vehicle has matured. There's not much more feature sets. Like swappables is probably the biggest thing. Turn signals, preventing double riding. These are all kind of inherent in the vehicles now. I can't see, and I don't think our competitors have, the next jump level vehicle and enhancement that would give rideshare the edge for a year. Like,
Exactly.
that's all it is. You get an edge for a year. And is it worth that much dollars to be able to develop your product to get that edge for a year? I don't think it is.
Yeah, I also remember a year when OEMs came up with computer vision integrated scooters, and we don't hear a lot now, right?
You don't.
In terms of the hardware, do you think at scale it makes sense to build your own hardware? I mean, just to give you an idea, Lime, we spoke about their top line. I mean, their GMV was close to 800 million last year. They build their own hardware, and does it make sense at a certain scale to build your own hardware?
I think if there is a certain business case that you believe that you can build a vehicle cheaper and better than your third party,
Hmm.
and you are at scale to afford it, that makes sense.
Okay.
Lime's in a category with a GMV that's obviously 4 times bigger than ours. That they can do that. Now they've been consistent, as I understand it. They've been inconsistent in terms of building their own, and
Yeah.
so they've been able to do that even at lower volumes. And I think they made a conscious decision from a capital allocation point of view, and perhaps they had more capital allocated to them, but they made
Hmm.
a capital allocation point of view to put it into hardware design, and that's good for them. That's their decision.
Got it. In terms of scale again, right? So if you look at a couple of years ago, I think Bird was competing equally with Lime across the world. Bird was, if you take all the players out there, Bird was global, Lime was global, right? Other players were more regional. I mean, you had European players, you had like Asian players, right? Um, and as we stand today, I mean, you did pull out of a couple of markets, right? And most of your focus is in the US. You did mention that there's probably one third in Europe. How do you see geographical expansion going from where you're today? Because 2024 was a transformational year. How do you look at geographical expansion?
So I look at this as right now focusing on the two markets, the two mega regions that we operate in right now. So North America
Yep.
represents 2/3 or more of our revenue. Um, we see still tremendous opportunities of growth, and it's a pace and sequence. Like I live in the city of Toronto. Micromobility is not legal. Shared micromobility has not been enabled in Toronto. Toronto is
Yep.
the third largest city in North America. It will come. And so when it comes, that'll be a tremendous growth opportunity. So we believe there are growth opportunities. So we're staying in this we're actually focusing our time in this region because we believe that there's a lot
Hmm.
of growth. With respect to Europe, our core markets are Italy, Portugal, Spain, and Israel.
Hmm.
We do have strong presences in France, Switzerland, um, Finland, and some presence in Belgium. Those areas we see some growth, but where the biggest growth in that particular region will probably be expanding ourselves in France and expanding in Germany. We just launched our relaunched our first market in Würzburg in
Hmm.
Germany. We will start to have a larger presence getting back into Germany under a different business model, a profitable business model. I don't see ourselves expanding into different mega regions at this point within,
Yep.
I'll say this point being 18 to 24 months. Part of it is a pragmatic point of view. The pragmatism is I've still got growth in the mega regions that
Yep.
can that fulfill our requirements or fulfill our growth. Once we've capped out of that, then I believe that we can grow. We'll start looking at mega regions.
Hmm.
But and the reason why is going into, let's say, Asia Pacific. Now we have partners in Asia Pacific, but we don't have any operations in Asia Pacific. There's a cost to that. It's
Yep.
like now you have a support team that's 24/7, both from a contact center, both from an R&D point of view, even from a G&A point of view, is 24/7. And there has to be a step. You have to feel your tap out of the growth of the mega regions because you now have to start investing in more
Yeah.
OpEx to be able to go into those other regions. And
Hmm.
so for me, until we get to that inflection point, tapped out
Hmm.
growth, I don't really want to invest in additional OpEx because
Yeah.
I just reduced the OpEx. So I don't want to increase the OpEx to service or to make an investment in growing in a mega region at this point.
Got it. So historically, Bird acquired a European company called Cirque at some point.
Yeah.
Gave a lot of market, opening here in Europe, and then acquired Spin as well, right? Would you look at M&A as a path for geographical expansion, or
Yeah, I would. I would. I
Mhm.
mean,
Okay,
um, I wasn't involved with the Cirque one, but I
yep,
was obviously involved with the Spin one. The Spin made sense
yep,
because it's within our strongest geos.
yep,
Um, if there was acquisitions within or mergers within Europe, I would
Mhm.
say that we would obviously take a look at that.
Yeah, when I look at Europe and the recent Tier Dot merger and the players out there today, any merger wouldn't give a lot of advantage to existing players in Europe because there's so much overlap with cities. Because where Bolt is, there is Voi. Where there's Voi, I mean, there's Tier Dot today, right?
Right.
Um, Probably the only company that doesn't have a lot of overlap is today Bird, right? So
Yes.
I mean, I would naturally assume that it's a right path, but yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of deals to be made across the world as we stand today.
I think so. It's interesting. Like, I mean, I think the only two players that operate in size in mega regions is Lime and ourselves,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And at scale. And so I think obviously you don't see Lime as an opportunity, like a merger opportunity, given they have that scale already. Um, merging or getting to, get us getting together, honestly, with any potential regional player, it would be it's
Yeah.
hugely, I think, hugely accretive.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been hinting that there's a deal waiting to happen. I think I did mention to you as well. I don't want to mention it in this podcast, but I think there's a deal waiting to happen in Europe. Uh, in terms of future, where do you think shared micromobility is going? Couple of things that I want to ask is one is, do you think is it shared micromobility? Is it like a mobility platform? Are we gonna get to a stage where companies wouldn't want any hardware completely managed by others? How do you see the space evolving in the next years?
That's interesting. First of all, I see this as a category being, shared micromobility being ubiquitous. I think of everyone in major cities will think about, do I take public transportation? Do I take rideshare? Or do I take an e-scooter or an e-bike to get where I want? And I think it's just a mindset change that changes. Um, where I see the business model evolving is I seeing this as making sure that, you know, the app is enabled to that, you don't necessarily have to activate download a Bird app. You already have like for us, you have Human Forest. We have a partnership with Human
Yep.
Forest. We have Lyft. We have Free Now. These are all apps that can enable to start a Bird. And I think I want to see that these sort of platform agnostic, that anyone with a phone can activate a Bird anywhere in the world. And that's where I think I'd like to see it go. I want to make it, in order for us to make this category ubiquitous, you got to make it as easy as possible for people to activate this. And then I see that as like, then you do have local players
Yeah.
that operate this, whether it's a OP model in-house or fleet manager operate, that make sure that the vehicles are taken care of. They're safe. The most important things is they're safe, and they're placed at the right place at the right time for people to use those vehicles. And whether that is, in-house operations, OP or FM, I think it's going to be tailored to that particular city. Every city is. I've discovered that as in my 2 years and 6 months in this business, I've discovered that every city has its own nuances, and there is never a one size fits all. You
Yeah.
have to cater it, and I think that's where that's where the operating models will gravitate towards.
Got it. This is my last question, and in 2020, it was in 2023, just before bankruptcy. I was on stage with you at Micromobility America, and I asked you a question about where do you see Bird in 5 years, and you told me that you hope to see Bird around, and you gave an answer around where you see Bird. I'm very sure that some of the people in the audience were skeptical, but right now I'm much more confident in asking the same question again because I'm very sure Bird is going to be around for the next 5 years and more. Where do you see Bird in the next 5 years?
Oh, but might have been a cheeky answer for me at the time. I hope well, but entering chapter 11, obviously, it's probably
Yeah.
the obvious question people ask. Where do I see? I see Bird still obviously around.
Yeah.
I see Bird on strong presence in North America, strong parent presence in Europe, diversified in terms of its revenue. And I think when I say that, I think it's going to be diversified in terms of shared micromobility will be more evenly balanced between scooters and e-bikes. Revenue will come from, there'll be, I think, a portion of revenue that will come from cities, because cities will see this as a viable public transportation and want to fund this. And what that translates to is we will have lower prices, so make it affordable for affordable people. Then I also see a third line of revenue is potentially ad revenue, whether it's on the app or on the vehicle itself. I see us generating a significant amount of revenue from those three sources that will enable us to be, we will be positive free cash flow with enough cash on the balance sheet to be able to expand into other geos and replenish the vehicles all the time. I mean, it's like, it's 5 years. So to say it differently, 5 years from now, we have diversified geos, which is very important. I think to make it like, to only operate in one geo is a disadvantage. So to have diversified geos is important. To have scale, which I think we already have. To have multimodal vehicles, so e-bikes and scooters, is an aspect of the business. Diversified revenue sources. So, even if there was a massive storm that shuts down your business, you're still getting revenue stream from the cities or potential ads. Yeah. And ultimately, all that leads down to a optimized gross margin, optimized OpEx that generates significant positive free cash flow that you can continue on investing into the business. And maybe that's a CFO answer. It's a CFO answer. Is like, I love the bottom line. I want free cash flow. I mean,
absolutely.
But honestly, to be able to make to make this business successful, you have to take the reins under your own control. We can't be dependent on third-party capital to grow this business. Yep. And so I see this is where I see that's where I want us to be, so that we are the masters of our own destiny.
Got it. For people who followed Bird very closely, they'll understand the tough job that was given to you, and how you managed to turn around this company. And I'm a big fan. I've followed this journey, for a very long time, and you've done an incredible job. And it's always a pleasure talking to you. And I'm looking forward to meeting you at the Micromobility Europe in Brussels, and you're on a panel as well. Looking forward to that chat as well. Always a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for coming on the pod.
And Prabin, I want to say thank you to you. I mean, I think I've enjoyed our conversations, and one of the things I wanted to share with you is, like, I think what you've done an amazing job of is you've been a great connector of all our competitors. We are obviously, I'm competitive by nature. Yeah. We're my everyone else is also competitive as well. And so it's not as if we're going to go outreach to each other. And so you've been able to connect us. And I think you're using micromobility as a way of connecting. And I think, yes, we are competitors, but there are elements that we can work together to make this category much more viable and stronger. And I think you've played an important role in terms of helping us get down that way. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. I mean, always a pleasure to help the industry. And I mean, the whole point of acquiring Micromobility Industries was that, because I love this category, and I'm super bullish about this category. And looking forward to meeting you at the event. And thank you so much for joining the conversation.